All right, so now we're also live on the other platform. So a few people checking in on IG. Thank you. It's Princess T. Hey, hey. Thank y'all for joining. So super excited, right? Got a lot of good feedback, had a lot of good conversation last week after generational dynamics part one. So we know that clearly this is part two, right? Because there was so much to say. There was so much to say that we really just needed to make sure that we took our time with it so we can process, right? So we know that 2023 is rolling now, and okay, this is the last week that I'll say Happy New Year, right? Because we're getting further and further into January. But Happy New Year one more time. I promise. That's the last time I say it. Um, and some people maybe are kind of in shock and disbelief that we're already 3 weeks in. We're here, right? 3 weeks in already for the year. Um, and if you're painfully thinking about it, then and you because you haven't gotten all your thoughts and plans organized or written down how you wanted to, just start. Just start. Trust that I do understand though. I do understand wanting to the emphasis on a clean slate, a new beginning, if you will. But overall, it's better to just make sure to start, right? Whatever that happens to be, but hopefully sooner than later, right? Okay. Um, it really just reminds me of a growth mindset. So a lot of you all may have heard of that phrase, and it's really just kind of simplified and summarized as the power of yet. So if something hasn't panned out yet, that doesn't mean that it won't, not just yet. So that was a little bonus right at the beginning. Y'all didn't even know we were going to do that, but there will be an official live getting deeper into growth mindset in February, though. So look forward to that because, again, we're about to round out January in just a moment. So I have is Princess T, move a lot of love. They said hello. If there's any other people out there, please do say hello, right? When you get here, right? You walked in the house, it's time to speak, right? Say hello. Let us know you're here. Um, we just really want to be clear about the work that we're doing and really drive home the fact that we're focusing on social emotional agility, right? We work to emphasize that, challenge, and also model that on an ongoing basis, but really wanting to be clear that it is a practice. And when we say a practice, because it's a constant thing. You're constantly learning and evolving. And I'm not going to say practice makes perfect. That's a lie, right? So that's almost its own almost segue to our generational conversation, because there's perfection. That's not a thing for humans. It's not. So practice makes progress, right? Practice makes growth, and both of those are good things. So I want us to stop carrying that, stop saying that. Hey, hey, Amy, thank you for tuning in. Hey, hey. All right. So again, y'all, please do say hello when you get here. Again, in 2023, we're executing with intention and the spirit of synergy. To my replay renegades, because I sincerely appreciate y'all. Y'all are part of the holistic collective as well. Please do make sure to put hashtag replay in the comments so we can touch base. Y'all, I'm so excited. The conversation was so good last week. So, generational dynamics 2.0. Here we go. So, first of all, if you missed part one, we can just go back real quick. You can go back real quick and watch it because there were a lot of valuable and detailed pieces of information there, right? Some profiles that we went through for the different generations, the generations among us, haha, right? Shout out to Gen Z and Alpha Generation. They would get that joke. Um, hey, hey, Wanda Bergeron, thank you. So a quick recap from last week, right? You had to get the goodies, to get it all the way, you have to go watch it. But I'll give you a quick overview of what we discussed. So we discussed how there are 6 generations moving and shaking again among us, but 5 of them are into adulthood and in the workplace today. So I have a question for you all. Can you all name any of those 5 that are officially adults or in the workplace? Can you name them? Can you name any of the generations that are in the workplace and technically adults right now? Can we name any of those generations? Okay. So Mufalada Love says baby boomers. Yes, that's one of the five. What else you got? Okay, Amy says Gen X. That's two. Thank you, Amy. Mufalada Love says millennials. We're at three. Okay, Amy also co-signed baby boomers. Mufalada Love said Gen Z. That's four. So the one, because most people do start with baby boomers. I was wondering if we were going to name that. So for the workplace, the fifth generation in the workplace is actually, they call it the silent generation, the traditionalist, right? So they're older than the baby boomers. They're like the baby boomers, maybe older siblings and parents. So alpha generation is our baby generation. It's our youngest generation that is technically alive, but they're not officially an adult in the workplace yet. Not quite yet. But we have some comments about that in just a moment. Okay, so quick recap. So going from oldest to youngest. So the silent or the traditionalist sometimes is called generation. About 1925 to 1945. The baby boomers about 1946 to 1964. And I'll say this, I'm gonna pause and say it almost feels super official, super formal reading the dates like that. But the reality is, I'm trying to retrain myself to say the 19 again, because especially for the traditionalists, what I just say, 1925 to 19, right? I can't just say 25 because it's going to be 25 again in just 2 more years. Imagine that this is the part where we are just kind of in between these centuries, right? So I'm trying to retrain myself to make sure I say the whole year again. So going on, Gen X, 1965 to 1980. Gen Y, aka the millennials, right? 1981 to 1994. And Gen Z, and we talked about how the Z is for Zoomer, because a lot of people had questions about that, right? The Z is for Zoomer, and they're from about 1995 to 2009. Hey, hey, Cultivated Connections. That's Tangeray of Cultivated Connections. Thank you for joining. And then again, our youngest people, the Alpha generation. So they were born 2010 and then more recently. Yes. Yes. Cultivated Connection calls them the Zoomy babies. Yes, yes. So we also mentioned that actually there's a little bit of a bonus and mini generation, sometimes called the bridge. And that's all I'm going to say about them because they got a special shout out in the last live. But to learn more, please go back and watch last week's. Okay, so we talked a lot about each one of those groups, more than just the years. We got into some more, we got in depth with some of the profile. But here we go. I would also, this is like my little disclaimer. I would feel remiss if I did not say that for the years, they're a little loose, right? People like to get into debates and arguments about where they start and stop. But it definitely, on an individual basis, there's a lot of factors that really shape your tendencies, right? Your generational tendencies. And it can be your birth order. We talked about that. Are you an oldest kid, a middle kid, or a younger kid? That will affect how you interact as a generation. Hey, hey, Clark Kent. Nice to see you. Thank you. Your proximity to the cusp of another generation, right? So are you a couple years away from before the generation switched? Then you might have some tendencies, some overlap in both, right? Other generational dynamics, such as did you grow up in a multi-generational household, right? Were you around older cousins a lot? Were you around great aunts, great uncles, grandparents, great greats? All those things definitely play a role. But for sure, one of the biggest pieces that's going to differentiate everything is the exposure to different technology and how fast technology was moving, the evolution at the time. All right, y'all. So that, again, that was our very brief overview, Right, Cultivated Connection said last week was so informative. Thank you. We're going to build on it now. We're going up. We're building. So we're digging a little deeper because, again, it was a basic profile last week. So we promised that we say more. So here we are. So if you're ready, if you're really ready to get into it, please drop a flame in the comments. If you're ready to set these generational dynamics on fire, drop a flame. If you're ready to set these generational dynamics on fire, drop a flame. All right. It's Princess T put some flowers because she knows we're growing our perspective. Thank you for that. Right. I think we're ready. We're ready. Okay. So we're again putting the flame, okay? Because we are setting these generational dynamics on fire, but in a positive way, So this evening, we're gonna get super specific in looking at the defining moments for the generations. When we say defining moments, those are events that for some, we say, oh, those are historical milestones. But for that generation, that event occurred during their coming of age at some point in their adolescence. So it has some influence on them, right? We're also going to look at who raised them because that has an influence on who they are as a generation. And we're going to look at some motivation and communication patterns as well. Cool. They're flaming it up in the chat. Cultivated Connections, W. Bergeron, Mufalata Love, Clark Kent, thank you. All right. So, with that being said, before we get into it, I was about to start. If you happen to be a particular member of a generation or you wanted to add to some of these defining moments, right, as we're sharing some of the bigger ones, please do use the chat and the comments to do that. So first up, again, we're going from oldest to youngest, the silent generation, the traditionalists. So again, someone, I think it was Princess T last week said, well, that's a weird name to me because they really weren't that silent, right? When we especially talked about some notable people from that generation being Dr. MLK Jr. and Frank and Barbara Walters, which they all literally had a lot to say, right? So I'm not sure exactly why they were named the silent generation, but we can also appreciate that they're called the traditionalists as well. So, yeah, Rosa as well. Yes, ma'am. So for our Facts Friday, I was giving y'all some clues. It was some clues that was leading up actually to what some of the questions, y'all didn't know y'all were going to have a little quiz, huh? Some of the questions that were going to be discussed during the generational dynamics today. Who knows? Who has a best guess for what percentage of the workspace or members of the silent generation or traditionalists? What percentage? So we know percentage can only go up to 100, right? The math teacher and me had to say that. Well, what percentage do you think the traditionalists make up at this point for our workforce? So yes, they're older, right? They're the eldest members in the workforce, but I want you to think that they're at the C-suite executive level most of the times. Maybe they founded some of these organizations. Okay, as Princess T said, 20%. What's your best guess? Okay, Mufalata Love agrees, 20%. Okay, Amy says 10%. These are some really good guesses. These are good guesses. All right, I know some of y'all are probably trying to go back and peek. I'm gonna go ahead and keep us moving along. So literally on the image that we showed and shared on Friday, it's 2% right now. 2% are actively in the workforce. But I can agree with your 10s and your 20s because if we think about more so part-time advisory boards, right, the board of advisors, things like that, then I'm sure the percentage will go up a bit. So defining moments for the traditionalist generation. 2%. Yeah, only 2. I know. They've been retired for a while mostly. Defining moments, the Great Depression, World War II, right? They saw the beginning and the end during the was considered their generation, and they were the first people to receive vaccines when the very first vaccines and having to receive vaccines when it was mandated. It was their generation first. So those are some defining moments. Again, as we go through the defining moments, if you have some other thoughts or events you would like to add, please do use the chat to do so. So who raised them? And so who raised them is a subject that we don't have as much information on yet, because at the time people were definitely um, subject to a lot of different factors, whether those factors were being able to trace the family heritage and lineage, geographic location, whether it was city versus rural, and then what occupation options they had as a result. Hey, Dr. Mel, Scholars for the Soul. Thank you for joining. Right? So all of those things influence them, especially the people that raise them, for sure. So not surprising, though, when we talk about the communication preference for traditional generation, definitely face-to-face and even a formal letter. What they value most, their motivation is loyalty and discipline. And again, that makes sense because you have to think that they grew up right on the heels and right in the midst of some really intense wartime. So the loyalty and being disciplined is definitely more in line with the service, right? With being in the service, the different levels and branches of the military. Next, baby boomers, right? That's where most of y'all started when y'all were naming y'all's generations. So a quick question, y'all, how did the boomers get their name? How did they get their name? Do you know? How did the baby boomers get their name? Because there was a lot of interest in how the different generations are named. So we're taking it from the top. We did silent traditionalist. Now we're on baby boomers. So how did they get their name? Does anyone know? Okay. Dr. Mel gave us a shrug. Cultivated connections. Tangerine said everybody was having babies at that time. So it's Princess T said they weren't as advanced as the Zoomers. What do you mean when you say they weren't as advanced? Say more. Amy says after the war, the babies exploded. Yes, so we're connecting all these dots for sure. So the post-war catch-up with a lot of love said, that's funny. That's a funny way to put it. But yes, right? So they're named baby boomers because remember, the war was over. Yes, the second war was over. So people were happy. They were less stressed. Soldiers came back home and there was literally a boom of babies. That's why they're called the baby boomers. Yes, that is the reason for sure. I'm going to have to borrow that one though. Post-war catch-up. That's funny. So right now, baby boomers are 25% of the workplace. And that's surprising to a lot of people, I think. I think people would think it's more, but it's 25% of the workplace. All right. Okay, and Amy also wanted to add the Vietnam War is one of the defining moments as well. Cultivated Connection said people out there being fast. I mean, that's all. I mean, it happened. That's literally why they have that name, because it was a boom of babies, literally. So defining moments. So Amy wanted to add the Vietnam War, definitely. The Civil Rights Movement, definitely a defining moment for them. The moon landing. And note that if you were a baby boomer, when you entered the workplace, you were one of the first groups of adults with PCs, with personal computers. You were one of the first groups of adults with personal computers. So that's something definitely to consider and to reflect on, because again, there's a lot of stereotypes out there. And a lot of times people feel like, oh, baby boomers aren't as technologically advanced, or they don't know what to do. But they were the first ones at work. with computers. That's the reality. So, okay. 2, so who raised them? So we know who raised them. It was mostly the traditionalists, the silent generation that we just talked about. So the influence that that had was because of their parents, the traditionalists going through the Great Depression and the other things we mentioned, that the idea of struggle and paying dues and determination, that all of those were a must, that all of those were a must, that was just, it was going to happen. You were going to have to work through that. Motivation, their motivation is innovation, right? They were willing to try different things, grit, the spirit of hard work and willingness. These are things that they value. Communication considerations, same thing as their parents. They prefer face to face. Next is telephone, and then email if that's the only option. So I'll say this: don't forget to light the comments up with the flame, y'all, because we are on fire. We're on fire with knowledge right now, right? And I wonder how many more corny flame references can I do? Just watch in my Usher voice, right? So Generation X is next. So for Generation X, they're the originators, we know, right, of the acid wash jeans, and they like Pepsi. If you don't know what I'm talking about, again, you have to watch last week's live, right? It was a very specific reference, a very specific reference. Well, let me pause for a moment. Mufalada Love says, moments under the umbrella of civil rights, the assassinations, significant assassinations for sure. John F. Kennedy, Malcolm X, and Dr. King, for sure, for sure. And that, yes, that's a huge umbrella. You're right, because there's a lot of moments underneath that umbrella. I definitely agree with that. Okay. So Gen X was seriously the first group that was most intensely studied and observed. So the reason why they were most intensely studied and observed is because there was a tech boom that occurred, right? A little bit of a tech boom where it was, things are moving a bit faster, right? There was a splash that, considering the other hundreds of years where it had been an industrial revolution, more so, we were past the industrial revolution and it was now starting to be more of a tech revolution. So things are going a bit faster. So they had opportunities for different careers and jobs that, again, had not existed in a whole different kind of way, right? So with that being said, they're about 33% of the workspace right now, about 33%. Can you all guess what are some of the defining moments for Gen X? Can you guess what are some of the defining moments for Gen X? So I'm going to give you a little bit of context. Again, it's kind of on the edge of mid 80s to mid 90s. So what are some of the defining moments that you all can think of that might have helped to shape Gen X? I want to hear y'all's opinions. Hey, Blessed Hands 86. Thank you for joining. Thank you. All right, because y'all did really well talking about some of the defining moments for baby boomers. Okay, so Mufalada Love finds it interesting that Gen X is about 1/3 of the workforce. Were you expecting it to be more or less? Or, okay, it's Princess T is thinking. Cultivated Connection said riots. Are you talking about the LA riots, the war on drugs? Yeah, those are definitely defining moments for Gen X. Also, AIDS, right? Being aware of and the spread of AIDS, the fall of the Berlin Wall, Gulf Wars. Yeah, this was a generation where MTV was a staple in their life. The first generation where MTV was a staple, right? A couple notable things. Okay, Move a Lot of Love says she thought that they would have been more than 1/3 of the workforce. Cultivated Connection said, yes, LA, Rodney King. You forgot about AIDS. Yes, yes. So again, we said that there was a tech boom, so things are moving a bit faster, right? So with that tech boom, they actually had two firsts as adults. So Gen X were the first adults with internet. Is Princess T. I know you're a Gen Z. That's probably hard for you to imagine. Like, what? Had to wait to be adults before there was internet. So what were they doing at work? Right? I thought the other people had computers. It was literally just working through. If you can imagine, just basically a typewriter and spreadsheets. That's basically just what it was. Just programs on the computer. That was it, right? So, okay, as Princess T said, also the Jonestown mass suicide. For sure. Yeah, so this was dial up. Cultivated Connection said, be clear. The first internet, it definitely was dial up. So that's a whole nother conversation to have. But guess what? They also were the first adults with cell phones. Now, no, it's not, the little phones we put in our pockets and things now, not at all. But I did want to make sure to note that because it was two tech jumps, two firsts that happened during Gen X's adulthood and their adolescence, their coming of age. Princess T said, is that why they had box TVs, the big ones? Yes. Yes, ma'am. So Cultivated Connections also said CDs. Yes. So that was how we listened to music, for sure. For sure. So getting into the who raised them. So who raised them due to more than likely baby boomers being their parents, whether it was in a one adult home or a two adult home, they were more career oriented parents. So that meant that Gen Xers had that their responsibility grew a bit because they might have been home a bit more and learning to cook a little earlier, a different kind of cook, I'm gonna say. We'll talk about that in a minute, but also creativity. So I happen to maybe entertain themselves, younger siblings, younger cousins, all of that. Then their grands were traditionalists, right? So they wanted to just kind of try something different, try a different kind of approach, especially when it comes to work. We're going to talk about that. So mass incarcerations, yeah. Yeah, because the 90s was a big peak for that. When you say the war on drugs and mass incarcerations, that's the same coin. That's the same coin for sure. So because of the family dynamics, right? Where maybe the parents were working more and the young people just got used to kind of being home, being a little more responsible for different things that carried over to work. Because imagine if you had certain responsibility as a young person, you're at work in the workforce, you don't necessarily want and you're not excited about someone giving you exact directives for how they want you to do something because you had a pretty independent childhood and adolescence, right? So they value independence, they value flexibility. So they value, again, freedom and being able to be kind of like a free agent, right? They understand that they can move around. So Gen X is infamous. Gen X is infamous for job hopping, quote unquote, because they know they don't have that same loyalty, if you will. That's not as important to them. What is important to them is their independence and flexibility. So if they feel like they can position themselves in a different opportunity to make that happen, then they will. Amy said the grandparents and the parents were working. Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of times, so imagine again, if they were young and had certain independence, they're not going to be super excited about going to work and now someone is trying to tell them exactly what to do. Like, are you kidding? Right? Seriously? All right. So Cultivated Connection said we don't like group projects. So she said she's Gen Y. Yeah. So not necessarily that Gen X doesn't like group projects, but it's the directive. So if we think about, let me differentiate that a bit more. So the independence in terms of not being micromanaged. Like, trust me that if you gave me the big picture, I can get it done. Let me clarify that. I'm glad you said that. So the next, everybody's favorite generation, right? The millennials, haha, because they have some new school but an old soul. But some factors surrounding the naming of the millennials. First of all, the official name of millennials is Gen Y, technically, right? So it is somewhat in the alpha order, right? Because we just had Gen X, so then Gen Y came, but also because these young people were going to come of age during what was being called that Y2K phase, right? So the Y2K phase where we were going from 1999 to 2000, and they were concerned that the computers were going to crash. They weren't going to be, they weren't going to know what to do. This a whole thing. Y'all Google it if you're unsure. If you didn't live through it, Google it, please. Okay. All right. Let's see. Cultivated Connection said, "Girl, that trickled down to us. We don't like being micromanaged. I remember Y2K. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. At that point, so you say to trickle down to you, but you have to remember that some of your personal moves, right, which kind of generational traits you might display, really have to do with your proximity to the other generation. So, was someone that was a Generation X person raising you? Did you hang out with your big cousin or the sibling a lot, right? An auntie who might have been a part of Gen X. So, all of that plays a role. But yes, I don't think many people, especially these days, take well to being micromanaged. Pause, hold that thought, actually. All right. So their communication preferences, right? Going back to Gen X for a minute was email and text. I'm not sure if we said that. All right. So Cultivated Connections is ready. She said big moments for 9/11. Big moments, excuse me, for millennials. 9/11, the school shootings, 106 in Park, right? And we weren't worried about MTV as much. Music videos, Yahoo Messenger. Okay, let's see. And Mufalada Love says she remembers too that the anticipation of Y2K was a big deal. Very much so. All right. So, really quickly, the millennials comprise about 35%, y'all, of the workspace right now. But the big moment, though, is that in the next 2 years, millennials are going to be the biggest group in the workspace in the next couple of years. So then my question to you all is, what percentage do you think they're forecasting? How big of a deal are the millennials going to be in these next couple of years? What percentage do you think the millennials will be? Let me see y'all in here saying some good stuff. Cultivated Connection said, my mom is Gen X. Okay. So picked up on the tendencies, right? MySpace. Yeah. MySpace was the thing for millennials. Gen Y. Instant Messenger, Black Planet. So y'all are definitely getting into it. Definitely getting into it. I'll say a little more in just a moment. But in the next couple of years, literally in 2023, they're making a prediction that the millennials will then be the largest group in the workforce. As Princess T said, 47%, Cultivated Connection said 50%, Amy said 85%, Mufalada Love said 40%. All right, Cultivated Connections is reminiscent. Nickelodeon. All right. So actually, Amy was closest. Y'all, in 2 years, the millennials are expected to go from 35% to 75%. 75% to go, I'm going to say it again, in these next couple of years, between 2023, where we are now, and 2025, the forecast is on point. They're trending as it should for millennials to comprise 75% of the workforce in the next couple of years. Okay, Mufalada Love said beepers, right? Defining moments for millennials. All right, y'all are saying some good things. As Princess T said, they're going to take over the world. Okay, Cultivated Connection says she loves talking about our era. Cool. All right, y'all. So let me see if I can add a couple things to what you all said. So yes, Columbine, 9/11 for sure. So Again, the tech boom, because again, for the tech boom, millennials were kind of on the edge. They were like a little younger. They were kind of on the cusp of their adolescence for that a bit. So if Gen X were more into their adulthood, then Gen Y, the millennials, it was right at that fork in the road for them, right? Some of those peak moments of adolescence. So, notable things that millennials were the first adults with Google and Facebook. And some of y'all might be giving me some side eye, like, well, how were they the first adults with Facebook? Thank you for asking, right? So, when Facebook first came out, you had to have a college email address to join Facebook. So if you happen to not be a student in college at that time, you could not get on Facebook because it had to be an email address that was connected to an institution. So first adults, and I'm saying adults, but just post high school, right? With Google and Facebook. It was for college students. Cultivated connections is right. Definitely. Mufalata Love said microwaves became popular in use. That actually is a more defining moment for the Gen X because of them being home a bit differently, right? So in terms of the meal preps and things, the kind of foods that they ate, like the TV dinners, that's more of a Gen X. So it's a little bit before millennials. Like it was rolling by the time Gen Y and millennials came along. And as Princess T said, that we used to call them old people. We know. Y'all used to say Facebook was for old people, but imagine it was created for college. That's why we were so shocked, right? When y'all would say that. That's funny. So, also, who raised the millennials? And the short answer is everybody. But seriously, who raised the millennials and what influence did they have? So, we're using the term raise a bit more loosely for this generation because of the older siblings, like we kind of talked about, the older siblings and cousins that may have been left in charge from Gen X. Maybe a parent was Gen X or a boomer parent. Then the grands were traditionalists. So everybody, a lot of people had a hand, right, in raising the millennials. Cultivated Connection said it did. Everybody had their hand in our lives. The village for real. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So, with some of the responsibilities, though, for millennials, Gen Y, relaxing a bit, right? Because the intensity of it, it wasn't the same because of technology. Remember, I told you how the technology boom happened right on the cusp for millennials. So, the technology boom affected the agriculture where clearly there weren't as many farmers, so people didn't have to work farms. So if you had an older sibling or cousin, y'all could literally just kind of hang out, right? You didn't have to go work a farm. Also fast food, right, grew in popularity that much more. So going back to what Mufalata Love was referring to, between the microwave and fast food becoming the chains booming, right? And then entertainment, because of technology, entertainment, it was that much easier, right, to be the oldest kid in charge, to watch the younger cousins, to watch the siblings, because you had a lot of help. You had a lot of help because of tech. It was different. Cultivated Connection said Beanie Babies, McDonald's was lit. And I think at one point McDonald's was even giving out Beanie Babies, if I remember correctly, as one of the toys, I think. Let me know. So, motivation. Again, because we're making sure that we tie a lot of these things together. So, Amy said that they were latchkey kids mostly. Kind of. They were kind of on the edge. So, technically, the title, quote unquote, of latchkey kids is given to Gen X, technically. But again, millennials, depending on their age, right, and who really was left in charge, then their story is the same. I agree. Their story is largely the same. It is. Okay. Motivation wise, for the millennials, for Gen Y, they value community service. They value diversity. Someone, I think, is Princess T, said that earlier. They value diversity quite a lot. And then confidence in the sense of they want to know that they can trust you. And then also efficiency. Remember that they had a few different moments, defining moments in their lives that involve technology. So efficiency, using time well is important to them, definitely. Communication considerations. Yeah, communication considerations. One is online message, right? They prefer to do, a lot of y'all talked about, now I think about my Instagram audience. Y'all were naming all the different platforms where people would message, right? Y'all were saying Black Planet and Facebook at first, and a lot of so this group, they were the first group that grew up with instant messaging, honestly. So that's still their preferred method, largely an online message or a mobile message, then a text like, hey, did you see the message? So that's still largely their preferred method due to growing up in coming of age when instant messages and chat rooms was really how they were growing up. That was their thing, coming of age. So then a text or email. So Sims, someone said that they like to play Sims a lot. So again, my goodness, y'all didn't think I was going to squeeze in some more flame references, but guess what? Here's another one, because we are just ablaze with insight as we reflect on these generational dynamics. If you agree, drop a flame that we are ablaze with these generational dynamics. Yes, because we still have a couple more to go, believe it or not, just a couple. So really quickly, last but not least, when we talk about the workforce, y'all, Generation Z. All right, I see y'all flaming it up. I appreciate it. I see y'all. I see you. Generation Z. Y'all, last but definitely not least, Generation Z, the Zoomers, the baby Zoomies, like Cultivated Connection calls them. Yeah, they're making an impression, but the reality is they have been since they began adolescence, right? As Princess T got excited, she said, that's us, right? Let me say this. Yes, they've been making an impression since they began adolescence, but let me remind everyone of this. And y'all know I get super serious when I talk about adolescence. So the adolescent span, again, is, now wait, let me see. Y'all should be able to tell me now, what is the span? What is the age range for adolescents? Because I've talked about it quite a bit. What's the age range? What's the span? Amy, it's okay, Amy. Thank you. And you know what? I will say it's easier on your phone too. It's easier to find the emojis on your phone than on the desktop. Let's see. Cultivated Connection said 10 to 25. Mufalada Love said 12 to 26. So technically, it is, let's see. It's Princess T said 13 to 25. Okay, good. I'm proud of y'all for that backside. I'm proud of y'all for that ending point. But the official definition, and I'm going to tell you the numbers that go with it, right? So the official definition is as soon as there's the physical onset, like once those hormones start changing. And for many young people these days, it's 10. It's 10. Okay. And then on the backside, it's all the way until your frontal lobe. So that cortex is finished developing, that decision making, again, that everybody waits for. And they're like, well, why would you? What made you? Right? Because that's when that starts clicking. That's what we're saying. Okay, they're growing up. Yeah, that doesn't finish developing. It's still marinating until 25. So 10 to 25. So that is a 15-year span. So I paused to talk about adolescence, the span, at least really quickly for a moment, because if we're talking about Gen Z, that yes, they're in the workplace. The reality is that yes, some of your colleagues, some of my colleagues, some of our people are definitely still in adolescence. So Amy said 10 is way too young, but it's when the puberty is starting because of the hormones. And as a former educator, it starts, that's pretty accurate. That and even a little before, honestly. Even a little before, 10 to 25. Because again, it's not not necessarily a full physical thing, but when the hormones start changing and you might start getting a little peach fuzz, all those physical things, when the physical things start, it's starting closer to 10 and younger these days. Hey, hey, after our creator, thank you for joining. All right. So that 15-year span, again, so we're in the workplace and making sure that we understand that a lot of our colleagues are rounding out, right? They're rounding out adolescence. So their decision making. Cultivated Connection said that she's seen it in age 8 or 9. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, seriously. Seriously. Right now, they're about 5% of the workplace right now, but they're going very quickly too, right? And making a big move within those next couple years. Like we said, for millennials are going to go from 35% to 75% by 2025. Right now, Gen Z is at 5% of the workspace, but by 2025, they're going to be at least 20%, at least 20% of the workspace. So they're growing quickly too. What are some of the defining moments though for Gen Z? I don't know if people have thought about their defining moments as much, right? Because they're a little bit younger. So depending on if you have some Gen Z members, right, in your space often to talk to and dialogue with, what are some of their defining moments if you had to think about it? Because they have some significant ones as well. Every generation does. What might be some of the defining moments for Gen Z? I didn't say platforms. Cultivated Connection said TikTok. It's Princess T said racism. That's through all the generations, lovely. That's through all the generations. It is. It is. So Cultivated Connection said Mike Brown. Okay. I think it's a little more difficult because I don't know if everyone has thought about it quite the same, right? But some of the specific cases. So Trayvon Martin. So entitlement. So we're talking about, we say defining moments. We're talking about and looking for maybe a historical moment, something that they have dealt with a lot that another generation hasn't. So Princess T said gun violence, mass school shootings again, right? Because we said if Gen Y experienced Columbine, that was the first, then it became mass school shootings. So Trump is president. But yes, they actually saw a couple different ends of the spectrum, if you will, during their lifetime. I was going to say, because it's Princess T said it. They've seen both, actually. Like they were very, very young. That for most of them, the president they saw most of their life for a while was Barack Obama. So defining moments, the Great Recession that we experienced, someone did say gun violence. Let me see. So Amy said, would 9/11 have impacted them? No, they were born well after 9/11 because 9/11 happened in 2001. So a lot of people that are in Gen Z, let me give you the year estimate again. So for Gen Z, they were born about, between 95 and maybe 2005, but they have no recollection. So they don't know anything about it technically. Okay, so as Princess T is talking about the climate change. So that is one thing that is very notable about Gen Z, how concerned, like we talked about the motivating factors, things they're motivated by. It's definitely the environment, right? They're very environmentally conscious, for sure. Right. So, okay. So we see is Princess T is going into more specific examples. She says the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. After our creator said virtual learning. Yeah. They kind of want, depending on if they're an older Zoomy, right, or a younger Zoomy. It depends. But because a lot of a lot of people from really millennials on down had some virtual learning, but for most people it wasn't until they got to post-secondary. But I agree that they have much more computer usage during school time. That is a great point. It is. All right. Let's see. What else? What else? So gender equality is definitely important to them. So that was one of the things. So for Gen Z, because of, again, kind of the extremes of what they've seen in politics for some of their defining moments, I'll say that they are, it's an unprecedented space of tolerance. They're very, that's how people are phrasing it, but their tolerance or their wanting people to be able to express themselves freely is their main thing. They want you to be real. They want authenticity. And again, that expression. And one thing about their expression, though, I'm going to go back to a couple other things. So they also never knew not having the internet. They never knew not having the internet. So for them, for Gen Z, they've almost always literally have had a global perspective. And I don't think people think about that a lot when they think about Gen Z. So a lot of times, for different reasons, a lot of people may think more about US issues and US things, but Gen Z has literally always had a global perspective because they've always had the internet. So then with them, they grew up with apps. Apps became a thing for their coming of age, and also social networking, right? A very regular part of their life. So with this expression, their expression is important to them because they are extremely diverse in their interests, their needs. Is they're probably one of the most complex groups in terms of looking for patterns and trends. But if we had to summarize it to say expression is because of they've been exposed to things on a global level, their access to things on a global level. So between Zoomers, right, and trickling down some to the Alpha generation. So we have a lot of young people now that they're into anime. They want to learn Japanese. They're into K-pop, right, the Korean boy bands and things because of this global perspective and always having the internet. It's been there in their hands since their day one. Imagine that. So their communication preference, clearly, right? They'll FaceTime you. They want to do a video call, a duo, Zoom. That's their preference for sure. But I will say that there is a good bit of overlap between millennials and Gen Z, but especially when it comes to, their global perspective. Again, not just it being limited to human scenarios, but also environmental scenarios as well. And they're optimistic though. They're a very optimistic group, and they want to use the tech to try to improve and address those things. Their expectations are high. So I'm going to mess with our creator a little bit after our creator a little bit. And when you said entitlement, I think it's their high expectations. They have high expectations, and we can interpret that a lot of different ways. But high expectations, right? Okay. So last but not least, and this one is just on the house, y'all, because they're definitely not a part of the workforce yet, but they're here and they're letting us know they're here, the Alpha generation. So these are our youngest people, our kiddos. This is a big year for them because a lot of them are entering their teenage life this year, right? Because they're born in about 2010. So this is a big deal, big year for them. So they're really challenging a lot of the status quo in terms of when certain milestones are reached in terms of your age. They're really pushing that a lot. They're filled with a lot of ideas and deep thought for little people, but I think it's because the people that we always talk about, the people that are raising them, right? The people that are raising them, again, is one of those moments of it's a super varied group who has influence over them as well. So there are for sure multi-generational homes and lifestyles, and perhaps maybe it's more of a guardian situation, not necessarily a parent situation. So that'll give more insight, right, and bring in more perspective, more background, more consciousness than maybe older generations have. A defining moment. Now, this one, I know y'all know this one. So for Alpha generation, if they had one defining moment, one big thing so far, what is their defining moment? What would you say? What would you say so far? Is there one big defining moment? What would you say so far for the Alpha generation? So people that are 13 and under right now. hmm So cultivated connections said the pandemic, for sure, COVID, because COVID definitely impacted them in some extra critical moments. Yes, everyone, right? Just like everyone, going back to what his Princess T said, everyone experienced racism throughout the generations, but um, for COVID, because it was certain developmental milestones that were critical for them during the Alpha generation coming of age, and as they're growing, that is it's impacting them a bit harder, a bit differently, for sure. Y'all got it. So who raised them? Again, it's a mix. It's basically everyone. The only group that may not be raising them are the traditionalists, but everybody else underneath, so the boomers, Gen X, millennials, Gen Z, mhm, everybody has some influence, okay? And in the last live, I talked about how they're kind of fascinating to just kind of observe and draw conclusions from, because with this, all these different generations pouring into them and all this different consciousness that is being built in them, we end up with these deep thinking kids, right? Kids that they're professional bakers and chefs already, right? 13 and under. They're able to interact and have exhibits such as Legoland, Crayola Experience. Their education is drenched in STEAM, right? Science, technology, engineering, and math, and STEAM, right? Science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. So this pushed not just in school, but also in extracurricular. So, and Princess T says sometimes overthinking, maybe sometimes, right? So again, all these different aspects, y'all, are just building into um, a different consciousness that they seem to have. So this knowledge and perspective of all the generations. So same kind of thing. They like video calls, right? They know the difference between video and audio calls. Not even engage in audio calls as much, or even text or anything. They just want to talk, right? Hold the phone up. So they're taking the phrase digital natives. The first generation that we would describe as digital natives were the Zoomies, but now it's a whole different level now with the Alpha generation. All right. Yeah, and at this point, we're just going to have to stop, drop, and roll to make sure that we just aren't engulfed in these flames of knowledge over here today. Okay, that's my last one. That's my last corny flame reference, I promise. But I really hope that you all were able to enjoy, not just enjoy, but just really reflect on these hopefully powerful moments, right? As we consider the overlap in the generations and the direct versus implicit lessons, depending on who's raising who and who has access to what, right? Just those life defining moments in history. And again, some of these we're watching in real time as they continue to define different moments in their lives, right? All the defining moments so far were in adolescence. But again, the reality is a number of the generations are still growing. They're still coming to full maturity. So some of this we'll watch in real time as well. Now, we're building next week. We're actually going deeper into those last two, our youngest two generations, because there's a specific support that they need that really needs to be discussed more, because it is an urgent situation. It's urgent. It really is. Let's see. Princess T said, What are the babies being born right now? Like, are they part of the alpha generation? Yes, for now, but I'm sure that's going to have a cutoff soon. It'll be something else. Because again, the alpha generation is about 13 years deep already. But I imagine it's going to be changing soon. I do. That's a good question. Right? Just like y'all were asking, all right, if we're Z, what comes next? So we start at alpha. So I don't know if it'll be beta or what. We'll see. We'll see. But for all of you all, thank you all so much for joining. And I do hope that you'll join us again soon as we do our part, right, to be members of the village, right, with these reflective and practical strategies that we're going to use and talk about next week. I'm Anika S. Jones. Please do say the S. I'm the community curator, the lead consultant of Holistic Fluency. Thank you. Thank you. But we want to add value, y'all, by building relational capacity and perspective. We want people to be emotional ninjas out here, where your emotional agility is just on point. That's what we want. So help us spread the word by reposting and tagging people. It's most appreciated. And I'll see you soon. See you next week. Bye-bye. Bye.